There we go. Is this stream working? Drum roll. Chat, can you see me? I did indeed boomer it. Hello everyone, good to see you. I apologise about that. I have no idea why Streamlabs started another stream. I think it's because I've tried this new format software setup. We should actually have text-to-speech enabled now. So during the stream, if you do send in super chats, it will be alerted. Brian will read them out. So we're just going to have a little bit of a chill afternoon here, ladies and gents. An hour to ourselves. I imagine that this is going to be a smaller audience. It will just be for the initiated, cream of the crop. I hope you're all having a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful Christmas. Yes, I did have a good reason to run on Chemi time. Excuse me. One, I had to put the spuds in the oven, of course. Steak and potatoes for dinner. But two, there was a local Rotary Club that knocked, and they have a Santa sleigh that goes up and down the road, blaring Christmas music. So number one, it would have been a very festive start if I would have started early, but also they knocked on the door and asked for some change, which I didn't have. But then I also looked at their website and they have a diversity and inclusion statement, and so for all the good a given charity might do, sorry, I'm just not going to give it away. If you disagree with me like that. Anyway, look, I'm going to be pulling questions from social media that I've got up ahead of time. Some screenshots from YouTube community and Substack subscribers, but also, if you send a super chat in, I'll just address it on the spot. But before we do start, I thought that it would be worth discussing someone who doesn't answer questions, and that would be Mr. Danny Finkelstein. Let me see if I can... There we go. Let me adjust this. See, I told you I'm boomering it on the fly. So, as many of you will have seen yesterday from my coverage, I decided to wade into the debate around the Piers Morgan and Nick Fuentes interview where Danny Finkelstein jump-scared the audience by zooming in with a pre-recorded message to plug his book, Hitler, Stalin, Mum and Dad, and talk to Nick about why he might want to take the horrors of the 20th century a little bit more seriously. And that backfired spectacularly because Nick had no idea who he was, and well, his attitude was basically, who is this old Jewish man lecturing me about his family who can't take my jokes as jokes? And ever since, and I'm sure there were some of you, because I saw it in the comments, some people decided to engage in some rather insulting rhetoric about Danny's family. Now, I didn't engage in any of that. Oh, here we go. There is a super chat. Okay, I will answer that in a moment. I'm just going to follow up with this. I actually think this ties in quite well, because this is an instance where people are confronted by the contradictions in their own worldview, or someone is saying out loud something they don't want to be said out loud, and so they react with volatility to it. So I decided to weigh into the debate, as you know, because lots of you watched that video. Thank you very much. If you haven't yet, it's the most recent video on the channel. I think it's a decent bit of commentary about why it's reasonable for the English to ask, to have for themselves, what Israel gives to the Jews in their own country. And that in no way says that they shouldn't have that. They can have it if they can keep it. As any people does when seeking self-determination, if you can found a plot of land and defend it on your own terms, then it's your country. I just want the ability to do so without being called woke right, or racist, or a white victimhood apologist by the reigning moral order. And you might say, well, why do you care about being called those things? I don't, insofar as it inhibits me from, and other people who aren't quite as audacious as me, perhaps, from doing something about it. Because these are terms that are used to gatekeep you out of mainstream politics, even though the majority of people agree with me. What matters is not whether or not the majority of people agree with you despite those names being thrown at you. What matters is whether or not you can have access to the halls of power to actually enact your agenda. And so I can take the slings and arrows of being called every name under the sun. I don't care. I know exactly what I think. It doesn't hurt me. And it's actually far more revealing about the people that call me said things than it is about me. But it is still used to pull the drawbridge up for young men who want to do something about their country. And so I decided to engage Danny Finkelstein, and he did this response that I read out yesterday. And the update is that a chap here who follows me said, Judaism is an ethno-religion. It's a sincerely held faith and a people. You can't reduce Britain to a religion without dealing with the question of ancestral ethnos. And he says, yes, Jews are a people. And the follow-up is, are the English? And Danny says, yes, of course. Okay, excellent. So we acknowledge, if we're hashing out our terms here, Mr. Finkelstein, that you recognise that the English people are as much an ethnicity as Jewish people are. So I followed up saying, so are the English, Scottish, Welsh and Irish. They deserve the same possession of and status in Britain as Jews enjoy in Israel. Wouldn't you agree, Danny? By Danny's own logic, if he is a universalist and not just an ethnic partisan, if Israel works for Jews, then we should have the same for the English, especially if he calls this country his home and wants to be kept safe from jihadists. I don't want Danny Finkelstein persecuted for being Jewish any more than I want the Pakistani grooming gangs to prey on white children or jihadists to blow up Ariana Grande concerts. So Danny responded, despite the traction and support that this tweet got. Your main interest in me is that I'm a Jew. Really, Danny? You hadn't mentioned it. Literally nobody would have known you were Jewish, Danny, if you hadn't have told me right there and then. It's not like you talk about it all the time. It's not like you inserted yourself into the debate that Piers Morgan had with Nick Fuentes, when he had no bloody clue who you were, and now I've spent the last week going on The Spectator and Times Radio and Piers Morgan's show and writing in the Times and reacting on Twitter to every mean-spirited groiper that makes a meme about a pair of shoes or a lampshade. Or today, I saw make a Justin Bieber parody about his mother. It's not like you've been doing that for over a week and talking about how the fact that you're Jewish and being targeted because you're Jewish. It's not like you've made that a core part of your identity in politics. No, I'm suddenly really interested in you being Jewish. Okay. Like, you do realise everyone can see this on the internet, yeah? And that everyone can see how farcical this is. Anyway, he says, your main interest in me is that I'm a Jew and you're a racist. Well, there we go. There goes the let's not have this conversation anymore shutdown button. Sorry, mate, that accusation doesn't work anymore. Not after the Pakistani grooming gangs, not after the Boris wave, not after all the atrocities that we see happening in America and Australia and the UK, that you know are happening too, because you know it's happening to Jews, and you also know it's happening to white people. But you only seem to care when it's happening to Jewish people, because people have pointed out to you time and time again, London has been made unsafe by the exact same people that are targeting Jews, but you were saying it was safe up until the day before Jews were getting massacred in Sydney. I care about both things happening, you don't seem to care about both things happening, and so people aren't going to take you seriously, because people will listen to you so long as they feel that you're actually on their team. But if you're engaging in blatant ethnic partisanship and saying, Israel works for Jews but you don't get to have an Israel, then people recognise that you are depriving them of something that works, and therefore they think you're not on their side. They actually consider you the stumbling block to ensuring that their own people, their own culture, their own country is secure. So you've just marked yourself out as an enemy. Anyway, he says, because if it wasn't that his main interest is that he is Jewish, you would know that I've long argued that this country's English tradition should be respected. No, you haven't. You have never said that there are other cultures which are wholly incompatible with English tradition. You've never said that England as a Christian country should not take in and accommodate other faiths that hate Christianity. You've never called for a Muslim ban, Danny. You've never said, oh, aren't there an awful lot of Hindus that seem to be involved in politics? There you go. Oh, thank you for the super chat, sir. Agreed. Thank you. Anyway, he says, I've been an opponent of mass migration and I believe this country, in this country as a British one, define a British person. Again, you've said that the English are a people in the same way the Jews are a people, but they don't get the same level of self-determination over their country as the Jews do over Israel. Again, it's a hypocrisy that you've never addressed, that I've presented to you now 3 or 4 times, and people can see it. He says, so I'm an odd person to pick on. Actually, you're not. You have made yourself very prominent. You are a lord. You were involved in shaping the last Conservative government and the reconfiguration of the Conservative Party under David Cameron. You are far more politically influential, wealthy, and platformed by mainstream outlets than I am, Danny. and yet you're saying I'm picking on you. You're the one responding to me. You don't have to. It's just people are interested in this conversation because I'm pointing out an irreconcilable contradiction in your worldview that you don't want to address, but everyone can see it. And these are people that aren't being mean-spirited, and these aren't people that Juiceberg online and blame Israel for everything. Again, you can have criticisms of Israel's foreign policy. I do. You can say it seems awfully unfair that Israel can be an ethno-state, whereas lots of left-wing Jews in the US, the UK, Australia, Europe insist that we have to be, as Danny himself says, liberal, pluralistic, and welcoming of asylum seekers and migrants. You can say all those things without needing to be insulting about the atrocities that Danny's family has endured, which I haven't been, but it turns out that even if you aren't insulting, you get treated exactly the same as someone who is insulting. So Danny, you're just encouraging people to insult you, because you're just being rude to them, like me. And he says, but we both know why you do. Yeah, because I want my people to be as safe as the Jews are in Israel. Why don't you? So actually, we both should know what I think, but instead you're playing the man and not the ball, and projecting by constantly saying that I have some ulterior motive or there's something I'm not saying. Anyone who's met me, and I'm pretty sure all of chat will agree at this point, someone's spamming that my mic volume is low. Anyone who's met me will agree at this point that I say exactly what I think at all hours of the day, even if it's at the expense of my self-preservation or presence on mainstream platforms. So you can never actually accuse me of not saying exactly what I think. This is ridiculous. And then he finished with, I've no interest in your white race war. Just delusional, man. And I resist your ludicrous self-pity and rabble-rousing. So it's self-pity when my country is under attack, but it's not ludicrous self-pity when you go and do the media round saying you feel unsafe in London as a Jewish person because Jewish people are getting shot in Bondi Beach and at a synagogue in Manchester. So it's completely reasonable for you to feel under attack as a member of a collective ethnic group, but it's not when we are also attacked. Again, the hypocrisy, just people just don't take you seriously when you say this. He says, it's why so many people on the right want nothing to do with you. Yeah, I've been cancelled from a lot of places, and I'm fine with that. I don't like the hypocrisy of those people doing the cancelling, mainly because they're in power. If they were hypocrites and they had no power, I wouldn't care. But my purpose of pointing out the hypocrisy is not because I think they're going to be held to their standards, Danny. The reason I was pressing you on this was, one, in good faith, to determine whether or not we might agree or disagree. But two, if we did disagree and you were a hypocrite, to dispel the illusion of everyone that still thought that you were on their side, that you were. And you're not. You don't care about us. That's okay. I don't expect you to. But it doesn't mean we have to take you seriously from here on out. And so, this is what I said in response. Bad faith name calling it is. I haven't insulted you, Danny. I've only tried to ask if the British are afforded the same standards as Jews are advocated for in Israel. I just want what Israel gives to Jews for my people too. And you haven't opposed mass migration. From what I've read, you only oppose the speed at which it is done, not the number, not the culture, not whether or not it should happen at all, because it provokes a political backlash. You've only focused on the second order effect, the right-wing backlash to the unwanted mass demographic change. And if Danny provides one instance, where he has opposed migration and demographic change for its own sake, not because it's unsustainable, not because of the political backlash, but respecting the repeatedly expressed will of the voters for saying we don't want it, then I'll retract. I'm waiting. Because Danny makes declarative moral statements that Britain should welcome migrants, even though it's against the wishes of the public. My contention has been that when native British people express their concerns about feeling unsafe and under attack in their own country, Danny calls them woke right and accuses them of playing white victimhood politics, basically gatekeeping them out of collective organisation when he recognises it's a tactic that works to keep Jews safe. But when Jews are made to feel unsafe by genocidal rhetoric and jihadid massacres, which we both agree are bad, then he declares heaven and earth must be moved to ensure their security. My empathy extends beyond my ethnic group, actually, as a Catholic. It's why I've had Jews contact me to agree with what I say, including a couple of very high-profile Jews that have texted me in the last 24 hours as a result of my long-form criticism of Danny Finkelstein on the channel, saying, yeah, I agree with everything you say. Danny Finkelstein is basically single-handedly increasing anti-Semitism by being a clown on the internet. But his empathy doesn't. His empathy is confined only to his in-group. So why would I care? If he says, you're being mean to me, okay, but you don't extend me the same consideration. So it actually feels like you're just trying to exploit me for personal gain. So I don't care what you call me, Danny. I don't care who you do and don't like, what you do and don't find offensive at this point. I'm not going to engage in offensive name-calling or mocking of your family, but you've lost all my sympathy when people do it, because you've just called me all sorts of names, you've engaged with me in bad faith, and you want to deprive my country of the same security that Israel affords to Jews. So, okay, you're just not my friend and you're not on my side, are you? And I said, this is why people won't listen to you, because you're not taking their side. As for those so many people on the right wing who want nothing to do with me, I take that as a compliment. The establishment that Danny belongs to has been responsible for our country being brought to this point, and he hasn't the humility to reflect on the part that he's all played in visiting atrocities on our people. Thank you for the super chat.
I saw a US police body cabinet. An Asian man bearing Maharaj was arrested for smuggling guns into London in microwaves. How many UK mosques are sitting on weapons caches, just waiting for the signal?
As far as I was alerted to in the summer, you can check out my reporting on Courage Media for this. Unfortunately, plenty. There have been multiple intelligence agencies that have been warning the UK about this, and the UK has ignored them because the intelligence agencies, and this is something we'll actually cover on my probably last live stream before Christmas, either on Saturday or Monday, they have been filling themselves up via DEI policies with Muslim activists. And so, of course, they're not going to investigate those warnings. And we know this might be the case as well because there was a Muslim policeman who... No... If you're going to do that, I will turn TTS off. Let's be fair. I've tried to be nice. I'm not engaging in being insulting. Okay? Anyway, the people in question who have warned me about this have warned me because the government hasn't been listening, and therefore, when we saw on... There we go. It's just going to be super chats endlessly. I'm not going to be able to finish my... Well, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for that. Do you remember during the Southport protests when there was a Muslim police officer in a blue high-vis jacket that went up to the masked and armed Muslim counter-protesters and said, "Put your weapons in the mosque, lads, and there'll be no more trouble." Okay, why are weapons being stashed in the mosque in the first place? Are weapons already been stashed there? There was already, I think it was Kazakhstani? Let me look this up. But there was already a weapons cache in a smuggled lorry that was discovered along with drugs earlier this year coming over on the ports of Dover. We already saw that there were multiple people enticed to... Oh, thank you for the super chat. Well, it's going to be far too loud if I do. So at least I can hear it. Anyway, so there was... We already saw that there were ISIS fighter footage spliced into the not training videos, the promotional videos that people smugglers use to entice men from the Middle East to break into the country. We already know that they use the Hawala finance system in order to facilitate this. So, how many jihadists are just breaking into the country? Here we go. There's the National Crime Agency reporting here. So this was at Dover Port, and what was discovered was, on the 28th of June, a shipment of 20 firearms, 320 rounds of ammunition, and drugs valued at £4.9 million inside a lorry at the port of Dover. It was a Lithuanian-registered lorry, but the driver was a 34-year-old Tajikistan national. Who financed that? Where did that come from? All questions that we still don't have answers to. How often does this happen every day? And for the Americans in the chat who are like, 320 rounds? I've got that under my bed. Remember, none of us are armed. They're armed, we aren't. So this is a total disaster. Anyway, there was an extensive answer to that chat. Let me just refresh this one.
When did you start to realize that our country was going in the wrong direction, and do you get frustrated at people who are still blind to the problems?
Yes, of course I do. And when did I first realize it? So there's a question later on that was in, I think, the YouTube comments that I've pulled up, but I may as well answer it now. My first moment of political prominence was after being a big comic book nerd and having all of my favourite characters diverse recast. and being frustrated, therefore, at feminism and just anti-whiteness in pop culture, I was then in 2017, 2018, listening to a fair amount of conservative content at the time. You know, Steven Crowder, Sargon of Akkad, SJW Destroyed compilations, and things like Daily Wire podcasts. We all started off listening to, you know, Milo and Shapiro and Michael Knowles, etc., Andrew Klavan. Some of those I have moved away from because I no longer enjoy their content. But at that time, the University Free Speech Society was hosting a series of events, including a debate between an Israeli and Palestinian ambassador. They had Jacob Rees-Mogg on for Brexit. They had a Brexit panel, and they also had Carl Benjamin visit. That was the first event that I went to. And when we went to that event, there was the head of the Feminist Society and her girlfriend in the front row that was screaming the N-word at Carl, and an Antifa mob had gathered outside to hand out flyers that said that the Pepe meme and Kekistan was Nazi propaganda, and therefore anyone that's going to this is a Nazi, and of course the meme at the time was Punch a Nazi. And it was later uncovered by the student newspaper that the president and vice president of the student union were in a group chat with local Antifa members and the Antifa Society, because there was one on campus, and various leftist groups, who were saying we should bait them into starting fights at their events so we can have the pretext to shut the event down. They weren't disciplined for this, and eventually, during BLM, by the way, the student newspaper retracted that article, even though it was entirely factually true, and apologized, because they said, as two black women, the paper was unduly critical of them. Anyway, so we were persecuted the entire time. We had threats spray painted on the side of the sports centre, and then we all got hauled in for a bunch of fake texts and doctor screenshots that had been published by the BBC and condemned by a local MP to do like diversity training or pay fees for offending certain student groups for edgy jokes in a group chat. And so after that total farce of a struggle session, I just decided, well, screw it. I may as well write about this stuff and get involved, because I've got nothing to lose now. Like, they've already pissed me off, and I think this is unjust, so I'm just going to dedicate myself to becoming their enemy. And so, accidentally, it snowballed from not liking Wally West to be recast as an African-American hip young kid and wanting to complain about feminism in video games to now, you know, arguing with lords on Twitter about whether or not the English should go extinct as an ethnic group. Weird times we live in. Hey. Anyway, I'm just going to address some questions. Some I've solicited from Twitter. Now, I want to correct this post because I forgot to put on the British right. I forgot Britain just because I took it for granted that I was talking about Britain. Of course, I'm not the largest member of Gen Z on the right. I mean, Fuentes gets like 1 million subscribers or viewers per live stream. No, I don't have that level of hubris. And then someone also pointed out that Lander also has like 140-something thousand subscribers. And I thought I'd made a grievous mistake because he's one of my mutuals and I didn't even know he was on YouTube. Turns out he's actually really old. So, still winning. Oh, thank you for the super chat.
Congrats, man. Liked your work, you're still doing good work out there. Liked your comics talk as someone who would like superhero comics but not a fan of the state they are /should be.
Yeah, comics are appalling at the moment. I will do some more comics content if people enjoy it. Just don't want it to be frivolous.
Hi, are you aware of Operation Blanco? Good book by Paul L. Williams.
I'm afraid I am not. I am happy to look into it, but as you've probably seen over my shoulder, I have an abject mountain of books. I'll let you have a look and see if you can spot any titles that you recognize. I'm going to do some more book review style content in the new year. It's just about framing it as a kind of... I like the structure of an essay that I present. So people responded really well, other than Ben Shapiro, to my video on Ben Shapiro's comments on trigonometry, where I read heavily from the likes of White Shift and Christopher Lash's Revolt of the Elite. So I'm probably going to do something on that in future. Maybe I might do a video on the post-war consensus. I definitely want to do something on the blank slate, and I want to do something on how liberalism is inextricable from wokeness, similar to some of the conversations I had with Carl back on Lotus Eaters. Just a bit more structured and refined, because that was obviously a very casual back and forth fireside chat. Thank you for the super chat, Laura.
Well done, Connor. Keep up the bravery and honesty.
I don't think it's necessarily brave because I just have a total lack of self-regard. Like, I don't think about what I say. I don't know if you've noticed this. This is why I will occasionally pause on words. Like then, I was thinking sort of staccato, like the juttering of a bit of music, but I couldn't get the word out. And it's because I don't choose the words ahead of time. If I'm speaking very deliberately, that's when I'm choosing my words carefully. But very rarely do I sit there and I never write a script, and I very rarely run through the words that I'm about to say in my head. So you are getting authentic and unfiltered, which is why I, for the first time ever, and I've never done this before, accidentally swore on live television earlier today. And I got rebuked for it. So there you go. Anyway, here's the first question that I'm going to take from Twitter. This is from Nelson. Congratulations, hitting 100k that fast shows you're connected with people. Thank you very much. What's the one lesson you've learned about building a loyal audience so quickly? Absolutely nothing. I've not had a strategy at all. As you guys can probably tell, the lighting's better on this episode. I hope you can. Though, you know, people have said my lips and ears are red. They just are, anyway, I'm afraid. Thank you for the super chat. Cole definitely wants to be a local MP. I've discussed this with him before. It's a dream he has because Carl is a very sincere man and he just wants to serve his community. And he cares deeply about Swindon. That's why he still lives in that post-apocalyptic bomb site. Thank you for the super chat. You appear to have forgotten to attach some text, so I'm sorry about that. Make sure you do, because otherwise you won't get your value for money. Anyway, Carl would be a fantastic local MP. I think he would be very good on the Westminster Hall debates that we cover quite frequently. And after the parliamentary recess, by the way, I'm going to be covering a lot more like actual parliamentary stuff, because very few people sit there and watch those long debates and go through the transcripts. Otherwise you won't know what's going on. Oh, thank you.
I know you may not be a fan of the setup, but I talked to Keisha for a talk on Bridgettown and movement operates. It is always surprising.
I am going to be honest, I don't know what any of that means. I don't know who Kirsch is, and Bridge, I'm not sure what the acronym is, so I will look out for chat for providing clarification on that. Please presume that I'm a total moron and that I don't share all of your frame of reference. Just assume that on many things, the aggregated wisdom of the chat will actually be smarter than me. I've got very good political instincts, I'm just going to say it. Like, I've made some really good big calls, and I've got quite the kill count of reputations this year. Danny Finkelstein being added to it. Thank you for the super chat, sir. Thank you, Craig. But just assume that I don't know everything, I haven't read everything, etc. Someone's saying she's a VTuber. Oh, is that anime thing? Yeah, I steer sort of clear of that.
Do young conservatives consider old conservatives as placeholders? If so, is it because they rarely defend race?
Thank you for the super chat. No, we consider them to be often intractable blockages. So older conservatives who get it, like someone like Ben Habib or Rupert Lowe, we appreciate them because they're willing to afford opportunities to younger people. However,
Is there somewhere we can DM? I'd love to offer some simple consulting on setting up your software and audio mix on your PC. Thanks for doing what you do.
I have a subscriber chat on Substack that people can access if they pay monthly. Occasionally, I don't really check Twitter DMs. They are open, so shoot that over as possible. I'm just going to pause the alert queue for a second and then resume it. But just to answer the other question this person put, we don't consider most BoomerCons placeholders. We consider them gatekeepers. And I said this earlier so I got a DM from a very prominent figure in the right-wing intellectual space who I've never interacted with before, but they watched my Nick Fuentes Piers Morgan breakdown, and they said that they appreciated the elucidation of why boomers and zoomers speak completely different moral languages. And I was explaining that basically older generations see our generation through zoo glass, and they think that we're feral animals, but it's actually them that has lived in this artificial habitat for such a long time. Because the welfare state, the pharmaceutical cyborg nature of the sexual revolution, the delusion that if we just shut our eyes and sing John Lennon's Imagine that we'll all be free and equal, all of these things are anathema to the natural order of things. They are destroying the covenants and concentric circles of love of family, tribe, kin, community, congregation, and nation. And this just can't go on. And so the boomer conservatives either need to be a bit more understanding, engage in a rapprochement with the younger guys. And I think there's a lot of Gen X guys that do this. I mean, Carl is an exemplar of this. Older millennials like Tim Pool and Steven Crowder. You know, I watched his argument with Piers Morgan about their respective Fuentes interviews, and Crowder was correct. He doesn't agree with Fuentes on everything, neither do I. But he was interested in exploring his views and understanding him and giving him a fair shake without trying to do a gotcha or, you know, basically dox his dad and try and get him fired when Nick's already had people show up with guns to his front door. So I think that the best older conservatives can do is listen to and accommodate our concerns while also imparting some wisdom off, because there's plenty of things that we don't know. For example, like there's loads of stuff that we've had to read about and catch ourselves up on because we didn't live through it. That gives us a new perspective for the crises of the present, but there's still useful things to be learned from the past, and I wouldn't have gotten where I am today if not for the wisdom imparted on to me, not just by my dad, but by both my grandfathers, and fortunately one is still alive and is going to be spending Christmas with me. Right, I'm going to resume the alerts. Hopefully that was a sufficient answer to your question, said Super Chatter that came in.
Would you sit down with Nick Fuentes? I think it would be a very interesting conversation to watch.
I am not opposed to it in principle because I'm happy to basically sit down with anyone. Like I said, I'm just going to pause the alert queue.
Bridges are rebranded TGI in the corporate world. The issue is an anime tuber who's been keeping track of that stuff and was ahead of the mainstream online rights discourse on the rebrand.
Okay.
Good, and I trust her dates.
Okay. You're welcome to send me a link or something. Maybe drop it in the comments. I will take a look at that. I read that recent Compact Magazine article where it mentioned the DEI rebrand. I didn't notice that they had reconfigured that specific acronym, but I don't doubt that it's still embedded in large corporations and every government institution. I mean, over here they just haven't rebranded it because we've got equalities duties written into our law. Anyway, as far as Nick, so I want to answer that question. Again, I'm happy in principle to sit down and talk to anyone that the audience thinks is worthwhile and that I think is politically substantive. Like I said, I'm happy to sit down next year with Majid Nawaz and work something out. I've been invited to sit down with Tommy Robinson. I don't agree with those guys on everything either, and I'm happy to have conversations with them if it's important. I've got interviews coming out on other channels very soon. I think I'm talking to Patrick Casey tomorrow, Restore Order USA, who I know doesn't get on with Nick. But again, Pat's been very nice to me and is asking for my perspective on UK politics. Anyway, I'm not talking around this. The only thing I will say is I don't know in my country if I'm legally allowed to. I don't have a presence on any video platform except for YouTube, so I think Nick's banned, so I don't know if that would be allowed. And it's not like I can phone up someone at YouTube and run it by them, like some of the large channels can. But also, again, realize that I don't exist in a free country. And even if I were to sit there and disagree with Nick on things like Islam, for example, which is a point of our disagreement, even though Nick said that Islam doesn't belong in America, which, based, agree, fantastic. I don't know if the police wouldn't just kick down my door. And the problem I would have is not actually whether or not the police should kick down my door and whether or not I care what I say should get me arrested for it, because I stand by everything I say, and I think I risk that fairly frequently. And the reason is, I mean, I've got a Solzhenitsyn shelf right there. I've read my Soviet history, you know. It's inevitable that this happens in regimes without any moral legitimacy. However, I will note that if the reason I was arrested would be a conversation with Nick Fuentes, the Free Speech Union would not come to my defense, even though I'm a paying member. Because there are certain red lines that even so-called free speech absolutists will not take. And that's not my judgment on them. I'm just being realistic about the fact that I would be thrown to the wolves. So perhaps in a different regime, in a different climate, if I end up being a free speech refugee to America, but yeah, no, I'm not principally opposed to it. It's just I might not legally be allowed. Anyway, sorry about that. I can see a message from my friend Charlie Sampson here, who, if Samson posts in chat, I will make him a moderator so he can clean up my chat a little bit as well. So do make a post. Anyway, I'm going to resume the queue.
are sent. Ex Jordan Peterson and Route Nick Fuentes. Congratulations on all your success, brother.
Thank you, Charlie.
Both Michael Jackson fans, let's have some fun. Off the Wall versus Thriller, Bad versus Dangerous, Age Shy Story versus Invincible. Which album wins each round?
Oh, okay, right. I'll do these in reverse order then. Off the Wall versus Dangerous. So Dangerous wins. No, wait. Off the Wall versus Thriller. Okay, Thriller wins that one, though the original track listing. So the original Thriller track listing had a bunch of songs that were included on the posthumous albums Michael and Escape. So it had, what was it? Love Never Felt So Good on the original Thriller track listing. It had Behind the Mask on there. So the only, and if we can change that out with the shitty Paul McCartney team up, fantastic. That wins every time. Where's my super chat queue? Sorry, I don't know how YouTube works, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't figured out by now, I'm kind of retarded. So I just need to check it written down. Okay. Bad versus Dangerous. Dangerous wins every time. The rock ballads on Dangerous. Jam, Who Is It? Why You Want to Trip on Me? Like, all of those songs are fantastic. So even though I like Bad, Man in the Mirror, Smooth Criminal, Speed Demon, still think Dangerous wins. Wait, Dirty Diana was bad as well, wasn't it? Ooh. It's close, but it's Dangerous. Okay, fine. And then History versus Invincible. I think it has to be History, even though History has more stinkers than Invincible does, just because the highs of History are much better. DS is good. Our song's fine. They Don't Really Care About Us. Well, it depends on which version. Joking. Dear Lord, I'm going to get cancelled by Danny Finkelstein again. So yeah, no, big Michael Jackson fan, turns out. That's the good part, I suppose, of my music taste. The rest of you have seen my music taste if you follow my Twitter. What was the one before that? Sorry, I've totally forgotten. They're coming in very fast. Thank you, everyone. I'm really grateful. From Tony Nieves. Oh, wow. Okay. How do I... There we go. Oh, I can't replay that. Okay, from Tony Nieves. Congratulations on the 100k. Why don't the boomers get it, despite how many messages are sent? Jordan is a boomer. And Jordan, like every boomer, has a hard ceiling on how based he can be. So I did once ask Jordan Peterson in a closed doors seminar, and I won't disclose it what everyone else said, but I said, if ARC doesn't work, if you can't sell a better story to people that don't have a frame of reference for it, for example, all the Muslims in Tower Hamlets that were surrounding the ARC venue, then what are you gonna do? Are you just gonna call it quits and say the West had its day? Or are you going to say there are certain incompatible people in our civilization that won't abide by that better story and so they have to leave for the sake of the safety of everyone else? And his answer was essentially, well, we had a good run. And I just wasn't happy with that. So I deeply respect Jordan because I think a lot of us wouldn't be where we are without Jordan Peterson's influence. But he has the uncanny ability to sort of sense world-ending events and dip out. And we all have to pray for his recovery. I can't remember who got me these. I think it was my friend Joseph, but they got us these wonderful rosary beads for our wedding. So get one of those, ladies and gentlemen. It actually makes it a lot nicer to pray with that physical reminder. Anyway, so Jordan Peterson, have great respect for him, but I think he has a hard ceiling. Andrew Tate, I don't think is the best brand ambassador. I think actually your credibility is undermined if you are a former pornographer who admits to scamming men by pretending to be the women that they're talking to and then converts to Islam. So as much as he says the Matrix is attacking me, I think he's actually an agent. I think it depends on the message that you put forward. Now, there are some boomers that I actually do reach. So, hashtag not all, not just the people watching, but there are lots of older people in politics who do actually quietly agree with me and frequently message me. They've just kept their head down because they don't want to lose their places in institutions. And that's fine. I'm not going to drop them in it. They're trying to do good things working within systems, my wedding guest list was fun, as Mr. Charlie Sampson can attest to. But I do think that the Napoleonic observation, when revolution comes, you can't trust a man over the age of, was it 30 or 40? I think that is very much setting in at the moment, and it's why the likes of this year Michael Gove and Robert Toombs and Danny Finkelstein and all sorts have just crashed out at my very presence, just saying things that are like banal and obvious. I really have mounted up a lot of enemies this year, like Stella Creasy and Accidentally Reform UK. Yeah, it's been a fun year. Anyway, we'll crack on.
American Catholic Super here. Married 5 years with 3 kids. Praying for your family and country. If a certain person renounced his Israeli citizenship, would it help him with right wings in Mars?
Thank you.
Big fat brother, keep fighting. Congrats on 100K.
I don't know who the certain person is with Israeli citizenship. Genuinely, I don't know who you're referring to. God bless. Glad that your family is in such excellent shape. Married 5 years with 3 kids. Well, I hope to get there eventually. Married, of course, but me and my wife hopefully are starting next year, and you know, that's in God's hands. But I'm glad there's so many Catholics in America, man. Like, there's a real revolution going on politically, and it's starting here as well. Don't underestimate the fact that all of the guys that you like, that coincidentally, again, you know, they're slightly more polite than me, but they're often shut out of politics too, like Harrison Pitt and Charlie Downs. They're Catholics. We're also getting a lot of flack from a lot of the establishment parties and antiquated right-wing figures. So, I suppose it means we're over the target.
Cheers from across the Atlantic. Read any good non-fiction books lately? Recommendations welcome. Prayers for you and yours, and a Merry Christmas from one papist to another. Keep up the good work, man.
God bless. Non-fiction books recently. Not for some time. I'm midway through This Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald, because I like Fitzgerald's work, and I'm working on a project about generational politics that may turn into a book if I actually ever finish the sample chapter that I've been asked to write, because I've just been snowed under with content and research and some things that are coming in the new year as well. And by the way, guys, I do everything myself, like all the editing, everything. The only thing I get some help with is the thumbnails, because I don't know how to use Photoshop and I'm retarded. Which is why everything looks scuffed. It's why it's taken me so long to like get decent lighting, because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, basically. Anyway, good non-fiction books. Read The Lave of Heaven. That's a fantastic book by Ursula Le Guin. Sci-fi, politics, philosophy, anti-utopianism, anti-progressive, very nourishing. Let me have a look on my shelves, because... Oh, Camp of the Saints. Although that's not really fiction, is it? That's more predictive at this point. Yevgeny Zamyatin's We, one of the original dystopias that I covered with Stelios back on Lotus Eaters. It inspired 1984 and Brave New World, written by a Soviet defector, or he's exiled from the Soviet Union, and it explains why when they say democracy, they just mean a governance structure befitting all human beings, presuming that they're blank slates, and therefore we have the same outcome over and over again. So they're all good. Anything else? Oh, Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground. But I have a really bad habit of picking up loads of secondhand books, as you would have seen from my recent post on Twitter and on YouTube community. I have a really bad habit of picking up loads of secondhand books all at once. Yeah, again, you can probably see some interesting books over my shoulder. Don't zoom in, chat. Don't zoom in. I read lots of books. I read things that I disagree with, and I keep them all the time. I've read more books by shitlibs than I have probably by our own side. Thank you for the £10, Billy. No, okay. Well, there we go. That one's no message attached. Thank you. And thank you, Nick.
Would you like to come speak at Oxford University?
I did the Oxford Union recently.
Also, did you know Jacob RM also hit 100K subs this week? A good
Okay, I don't follow Jacob Rees-Mogg's work. I have met him once, and it was just a brief hello. he once said that as a minister, he would vote for collective responsibility if there were a pro-abortion motion coming up, despite being a Catholic. I would just resign, personally. Yeah, as far as Oxford, so I didn't even know I had a LinkedIn. I forgot it existed, so that's kind of embarrassing. That's like quite subcontinent coded, isn't it? Yeah, message me on LinkedIn, bro. Fine. Reach out through either X or I'm not sure what else. Substack messages, perhaps. I spoke with the Oxford Union fairly recently. They haven't given me an update on when the footage is available, but the guy who organised it said hopefully soon. When I get it, I'll post it to the channel. I think I did okay. I found the time format quite constraining, and I had drunk John Sweeney dressed like a South Park character yelling at me when I wasn't taking interjections after I'd already taken one of his. So it was a bit interrupted. It was also very disappointing that most of the students sort of walked out before they heard all the talks because they'd already made their mind up. And it's like, is this really how low the prestigious union has sunk to? But it did come out with some fantastic meme-worthy images. So my Twitter banner, if you haven't seen it, 1 second. Oh, this is so entertaining for everyone. Yeah, Connor, just keep clicking on things and not saying anything. Isn't that really, really fascinating? Where is it? Display capture. Oh, smooth. There we go. Brown fatigue in real time, I suppose. Anyway, we'll get back to your super chats. Oh, that one's already been read. Hello, Streamlabs. Are we gonna... Right, let me try and refresh this. You're gonna have to forgive me. Thank you for the super chat. I presume FNT is Friday Night Tights. I haven't spoken to any of the guys over there other than Gary, who was meant to come on Lotus Eaters when he visited London and then couldn't make it. Which is a shame because, of course, you know, Harry and I really were looking forward to talking to him and hopefully doing a Comics Corner episode. I haven't been asked. If I get asked, sure, I'm not opposed to it. Andrew Wilson, sure. Again, I'm not opposed to talking to the guy. We had a mutual friend in Jake Julius, who runs Rattlesnake TV, who was trying to set up a debate for some reason, but he was saying, oh, Carl and Connor should debate Andrew Wilson. I was like, on what? Like, what are we really going to disagree on other than, I don't know, he's Orthodox, isn't he? And I'm Catholic, but I'm probably not the best representative for theology. Like, I get chewed out by all my Catholic friends when I go to DC, who are, they can quote Aquinas like I can quote migrant crime statistics, you know, so they're probably better at doing it than me. I'm not chickening out or anything. I'm happy to talk to Andrew Wilson if there's something interesting to come up with, but I'm not just going to do things for the sake of doing them, because it doesn't provide much value to my audience or his, you know. But hey, if also when people say, oh, please talk to, you know, I'll phone them up. Like I talk to the people that I know, and the reason I don't do digital interviews on this channel, by the way, number one is because I prefer the live stream format, but number two, I actually don't know how the hell I would even set that up. I have no idea how the tech would work. I don't have a producer. It's just me. You're going to have to suffer my retardation. I apologize. Sure. I am happy to engage in game theory when it comes to morals. I'm happy to extend consideration free speech protections to the people that want to engage in discourse. Communists and Muslims and the like who don't believe in free speech, who believe that speech is instrumental and that you can basically blaspheme or engender inequalities that are tantamount to violence, and therefore violence should be responded to in kind with violence. Yeah, you don't get free speech protections any more than you would if you were playing a Monopoly game and stealing from the bank. Like, you don't get to pass go, you don't get to collect £200, you go straight to jail. Thank you for the super chat. I don't know, my YouTube channel gets shut down, I probably get arrested at some point. Genuinely, that's not unlikely. Big predictions for Britain in 2026. currency insolvency. Lots of people are predicting it. We don't know when the market's going to go belly up and whether or not the IMF will bail us out. I think actually that's one of my conspiratorial reasons that I've told Liz that she got ousted by the markets is because she slightly transgressed against the social orthodoxy on things like trans and climate, which meant that she wasn't abiding by all of the values of the international institutions that would bail you out after the bond markets went insolvent because of quantitative easing and poorly managed LDIs. And so I think this Labour government probably would be bailed out to an extent, but not to the extent that they need to be because the pound is so weak. And so we could have a real economic catastrophe. And also, Starmer could go. And I think actually that Shabana Mahmood's going to replace him. Even though Wes Streeting has been eyeing it up for a while. Now you've got Labour MPs coming out and saying that actually the PPT blockers trial is a really bad thing. And you can see him umming and ahhing about it on LBC the other day saying, oh, I'm uncomfortable, but the experts say. And it's like, well, if the experts told me to sterilise a child... I think I was told in school that, oh, if he jumped off a cliff, would you join him? Yeah, so I wouldn't join in that, thank you very much. I don't have to outsource all my critical thinking capacities to the system, or hide the fact that I actually want it to proceed. So I don't think it's going to be Wes Streeting, I think it's going to be Shabana Mahmood, and as dear Dr. Parvini tells you, always listen to what Blair is doing. The Tony Blair Institute hosted their Christmas event a week or so ago. Shabana Mahmood was the guest of honour being interviewed by Blair, and she said, when she was there, is Alistair Campbell in the room? Because he famously said, we don't do God. And she said, actually, I do God, because faith is part of the reason I'm in public service. So we're going to get our first Muslim girl boss prime minister by fiat, thanks to the Labour Party. But don't worry, she'll be succeeded by our second Muslim prime minister, Inzia Yusuf.
Speaking on free speech, I hope the US opens the government in Australia.
I think they will.
The problems here are past the point of voting our way out of it. Both youth and reference voting and more than 50% of the population is now foreign.
I thought it was 32, but...
I was just watching Nick Dixon's stream, and he kindly read out my non-super chat message.
Am I conflicting with Nick? Nick, I'm so sorry. Go and subscribe to Nick Dixon. He's a good lad. Thank you, sir.
Have you seen a certain documentary called The Greatest Story Never Told?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it. I know what it is.
For ages, seems to be blocking parts or certain words.
I will make a point here. And again, everything I say is going to get me in trouble with somebody. I don't think it's very wise for people to try and rehabilitate the image of Adolf Hitler. At the same time, I obviously don't think that we should accept collective guilt for the Holocaust or have the Second World War be the gravity well around which all of our politics revolves. It's the same way that Pat Casey actually put out a really good video saying don't be Israel first. As in, don't make one thing your only issue if it's not to do with your people specifically. So don't be so pro-Israel or so anti-Israel it's the only thing you talk about. Don't be so reactive to the fact that the Second World War is used as a stick to beat white people with to say you don't get to have a country anymore, that you then go, okay, I'll inhibit the framing of the bad guy. This was the point that I was making in my Danny Finkelstein video. I think we should actually focus on our own domestic heroes. And also, that isn't limited to, oh, Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher, you know, the BoomerCon avatars. We can say Athelstan or Alfred the Great or Cromwell or Guy Fawkes, you know, whichever denomination you are. There are all sorts of other heroes throughout English history that are useful sources for comparison. It might be I don't know, chat, if you're interested in a sort of history video, I'll let me know and I'll do one, because I'm currently chonking back through Robert Tombs's The English and Their History, the section on the Norman conquests and how history was rewritten by the replacement ruling class to justify expropriating land from the Anglo-Saxons and treating them as second-class citizens of their own country, has some interesting parallels, doesn't it? So that might be an interesting one, but I just think we can broaden our historical horizons away from just only ever talking about the Second World War in either a positive or negative light. I think we can say, actually, this isn't the only event that's ever happened in history, and it doesn't have any unique moral hold over me than all the other atrocities in history do, and it doesn't mean we don't get to have a country anymore, and it also doesn't mean that we have to morph into Adolf Hitler in order to get our country back, because also his project just didn't work. And also, the Allied powers that... Well, okay, no, not the Allied powers. Allow me to correct myself. Winston Churchill did not want what happened to Britain to happen to Britain. 1952, I think it was, he proposed his re-election campaign to be with the slogan, "Keep Britain White." So some of the Churchill revisionism, it does omit the fact that he was, well, he was born in the Victorian era, so he didn't exactly have modern progressive values, did he?
Would you, under any circumstances, move to America if the UK got to the point it was unsalvageable? If so, what do those circumstances look like?
If my family is under imminent violent threat and I can't afford the security. Because I'm not rich, by the way. My only income is you guys at the moment, and a new project that I've been working on quietly behind the scenes that has, fallen on and off in the last year or so. But that's starting next year, and that's still pennies. So it's literally just my Substack, my Twitter, and my YouTube that is keeping me afloat. And for that, I am grateful for everything that everyone sends in, and you don't have to, but I hope I'm providing you with some value. If I've already been stalked before, I get recognised a fair bit, and it's usually been benign or benevolent. If it's ever malicious and things get really bad, then of course I'll apply for some sort of refugee visa. I know that Naomi Sight, who used to come into Lotus Eater's office a few times, really sweet girl, actually very genuine. She's currently applying for asylum in the US because the German government has persecuted her. That I admire. But unless my family is under direct threat and the state will do nothing to help me, and I can't afford security, I'm making my stand here. Because England's not Osgiliath, it's Minas Tirith, we have nowhere to retreat to. And our ancestors won't forgive us if we abandon the motherland forever, If I had to go to America, I'd only be King Alfred burning his cakes in exile.
Congratulations. What do you think about celebrating pre-Christian Celtic/Norse/Anglo-Saxon culture and retaining our homeland? We can utilize this for morale boosting and furthering nationalism. Great Britain emoji.
I think that's sensible. Every civilization engages in ancestor worship, and so does... And this bleeds through into the post-war consensus, because that's exactly what war memorials are. They're acts of ancestor worship, which is why it was so offensive to us when they were desecrated by BLM and the Palestinian mob. And this is why, making common cause with the Palestinians, because we don't like the undue influence that the Israeli state or ethnic lobbyists have on our politics, is unwise, because they hate whites and Christians just as much as they hate Jews. And they will deface our monuments for fun because they are resentful race communists at heart. So, should we celebrate that sort of stuff? Yes. Again, I, as a 27-year-old man, trying to do as much reading as he can while juggling everything else, I am still getting familiar on that history. If you want to look at more of that, I recommend Survive the Drive, who is a sincere pagan. Every Englishman is a baptized pagan, so he'll come around to the baptism eventually, I'm sure. I'm only teasing because he's a very knowledgeable, very polite man, and far better looking than I. So if you want to watch some nourishing content on our Anglo-Saxon, Nordic, Celtic heritage, and why contemporary myth making about how Cheddar Man was actually black, for example, is all bullshit, go watch Tom Rousel. I did indeed. Okay, so I'll probably be appearing on an upcoming episode. She says that whenever she does something on Islam or immigration and the like, that she'll tag team me in. Liz is lovely. I sent my feedback to her and one of my dear friends who I know is watching, who's actually working on the show, doing a lot of the edits and promotions and things like that. I think she just needs to have maybe one guest a show, allow it a bit more time to breathe, be a bit more conversational, and it'll be fine. The strength lies in providing unique insights that you're not going to get from anyone else than someone who spent time in government. But also, hey, I don't know what advice to provide to people because I didn't expect this channel to take off. if you guys didn't notice, I left Lotus Eaters in March, and I see people asking why that happened. By the way, it's nothing nefarious. It's that I was working on a bunch of projects that I couldn't talk about and still can't because I've signed some NDAs behind the scenes, while also I didn't have the time to dedicate to coming into Swindon twice a week, which was 5 hours of total traveling, and I couldn't afford it. So, and in the meantime, I thought I was going to restart a show somewhere else because I basically signed up to do it, and then that project just hasn't materialized. And so I was like, well, between when that project takes off, which question marks as to whether it won't, because, well, I might get in trouble for saying this, but Charlie Kirk was involved with one of the projects that I was doing, and obviously, God rest his soul. So I just thought, until that project takes off, I'll just restart a show, because I really enjoyed doing my monologue show, and it was effective, and nobody else was doing it in the UK. And then, eventually, if it gains steam, it can just be folded into that new project. And now, accidentally, 100,000 subscribers in less than a year. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. But yeah, that's my feedback on Liz's show. And I look forward to going on it eventually. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
With the amount of influential elements in politics at this point, the sequel to the Liberal Empire Strikes Back is about to be the return of the Papists.
Probably true. We're going to get to choose between Vance, Rubio, or whatever America First candidate gets put up in America.
Will you accept a wave of Texan immigrants? We will bring our barbecue, which is better than current. His partner, clinking beer mugs emoji.
I love Texan barbecue, and you guys don't want to immigrate to Britain over at this point. But I've already said, actually, that in the interest of wanting for my people what Israel has, I would do a right of return policy for ethnic Anglos and Celts in Australia, Canada, America, New Zealand, and allow people from the Anglosphere to repatriate themselves back to the motherland after we do remigration. Because if we need a little trickle of elite human capital coming into the country, it should at least be our people, right? I think that's more than sensible. So yeah, I'd love Jeff Younger to come over and take me shooting again and take me to a Texas barbecue, but this time in my country. When we regain our freedom. When we win. When we press the fix everything button. Sorry. I haven't. I've heard of this from Apostate Prophet. He mentioned it on a video. I will watch it at some point. Sorry, someone just put a really funny thing in chat, because I am watching the chat. Someone said, do your ears have a separate climate, Connor? This is the thing. I embrace the ear jokes because, it would be profoundly feminine if I cared. It's not something I can do anything about. My wife thinks they're cute. It's never stopped me getting... Well, I'm not saying that the quality of the women was all that spectacular, but it hasn't stopped me. So yeah. Oh well. They've always been red. What can I say? In lieu of a red face that the Irish get from drinking, instead all the blood just goes to my extremities. That sounded bad, didn't it? Let's continue.
I need other UK podcasts besides Carl Benjamin to keep me updated on the situation in the UK.
It depends on the format that you like. I mean, Dan Wootton basically does the Megyn Kelly show for the UK. Dan's a gentleman, but he's a showman, so it's not going to suit everybody. It's why I think his audience skews quite female, and they're interested in the royal family, whereas I've told Dan repeatedly I'm far too straight for that, despite what my music taste may lead you to believe. Any other UK podcasts? The problem is we don't have many UK podcasts, because most podcasts have institutional backing in the UK. There's not a thriving alt media sphere, because there wasn't a lot of heavy investment, like, the Daily Wire got oil money from the start, and talk radio conservatism tipped straight over into alt media as well. So the UK at the moment, the podcast here is Winston Marshall, who doesn't like me, Trigonometry, who have some good guests, and as much as people don't like Konstantin Kissin, I have to say he is very sincere. He doesn't get on with all my friends. They have set twos, but he's always been very kind to me. And hey, look, I wasn't banned from the Trigonometry Christmas Party. It's the only thing I wasn't banned from this year. And they said that we might want to do an updated episode next year. And the fact that they're still willing to sit down and have a conversation with me, despite substantively disagreeing with some of my takes, means they're at least acting in good faith. So I won't rubbish them for that. But we actually have a real deficit of direct commentary and news coverage. We've got a lot of interview podcasts, and everyone sort of interviews each other. Who does really good videos? Morgoth's good. Morgoth's video essays are excellent. Even though he's fallen out with my good friend Mary Harrington. If I think of any more, I'll let you know.
I love your video about Danny Finkel's tea. My particular favourite part is the hilariously esoteric bacon sandwich plum, glass of milk dad insult.
I've seen a lot of mean things about Danny Finkelstein online, and I don't wish to be mean, even though he's very mean about me.
Merry Christmas, Connor. Show me the Groypers joining us and actually doing something. Those that aren't foreign bots, that is.
I think there are. There's a reason that Nick gets tip-offs. There are people that watch his show that are in government institutions.
Hey, Connor, what are your thoughts on Charlie Bitch? Would you ever
Who's that?
have a conversation with
Charlie Viet. Sorry, I don't know who this person is. British YouTuber. I'm afraid I don't know who Charlie Veach is. Again, I don't always have everyone's frame of reference. I'm a boomer at heart, I'm afraid.
very right-wing counter-currents, US mover here. Very impressive work you do. How do you handle being Catholic in a church which makes accepting mass migration into the Eurosphere moral duty?
Okay, so I, as a natural transgressive and contrarian, I do disagree very frequently with the Pope when he's not making infallible statements. Also, it's not in the Catechism or biblical scripture that you have to demolish your borders and take in literally anyone from everywhere and give them all your money. If anything, there's quite the warning in Deuteronomy against that. It's just that essentially the Soviet invention of liberation theology, as well as the infiltration of the what word am I looking for? Sorry, my brain is completely blanked. Seminaries. They have been entirely ideologically captured by Marxist doctrine and actual Marxists. Paul Kengor's written about this quite well. Dr. Bella Dodd sort of admitted to being part of it in a congressional hearing. So all of the McCarthyism thing, it was all real. So unfortunately that's trickled down. But what the way I reconcile it is I'm not going to abandon the One Holy and Apostolic Church, which has a legitimate line of succession from St. Peter, just because there are a bunch of corrupt people in the institution, any more than I'm going to forgo the fact that monarchy is the best form of government for man, despite the fact that my king is basically a crypto-Muslim. So, yes, there are awful people that occupy the institution. It doesn't mean the hierarchy is illegitimate. It doesn't mean that we can't regrow from a withered sapling the beautiful tree of our civilization in whose shade our ancestors can sit. The doctrine is still correct because of the fruits that is produced. By your fruits you shall know them. It's just that there's a lot of weeds around that tree at the moment. Gay. They are tasty, and I actually need to eat meat. Sorry, that's the natural human state. We don't eat sort of simulacra slop.
I don't think that Andrew Tate is a role model to disparage Jordan. I was saying Jordan was a messenger in that there is problem of disposed young men.
Agree, appreciated. Lots of decent people talking about it. Not listened to, unfortunately.
Who is your favourite actor?
Ooh.
Whether of all of England or of one of the petty kingdoms?
It might be a boilerplate answer, but it might have to be Alfred. All the mythology around him, burning his cakes in the wilderness and then coming back and retaking the captured kingdoms from the Viking invaders, writing the Doom book, all of these foundational things. Though it was interesting that I think it was Athelstan, who was equally as important because he was the first king of all of England, but he wasn't really recognised as a great Anglo-Saxon king until the Victorians revisited Anglo-Saxon history. So it's interesting how we've forgotten great figures in our history because of the rewriting of history by said elites after Norman conquest. Anyway, yeah, I might do a video on that. Why not? Thank you, sir. Appreciated. Merry Christmas to you too.
Merry Christmas, Connor, and congrats on hitting 100k. Love your work. My this comics corner though inspired me to look up some of my old comics again.
Well, I've got loads here,
Great work.
so we can always cover them at some point.
Jewish guy less than I feel thinkless teens are going to keep the rest of us killed by right anger of others' sense of injustice.
This has been my point the entire time, and this is why I've actually had some quite high-profile Jewish people reach out to me and say, I agree with everything you say, and they've never tried to control my message. It's because they can recognize that it's in their self-interest, as a people and as a person, to support the populations that are most likely to be friendly and considerate towards them, being the unchallenged majorities in their homelands. And no, a country is not good just because that majority protects Jews. It is just a byproduct of the fact that Anglo-Christians are quite considerate to people, whereas other populations are not. And so they've just made the calculation that, actually, to be fair, the sort of rising young nativist right are probably right about all this stuff, and it's a reasonable demand to say that they want their countries to treat them like Israel treats us. And so if we didn't counter-signal them on that, and actually, snipped the tripwires of people calling them racist and anti-Semitic and saying we should flood their country full of Muslims, then we might be safer. And you know what? Despite our theological differences, just as I theologically disagree with Japanese Buddhists or Shinto practitioners, I appreciate the support. I am always thankful when an outsider likes my culture enough that they think that we should do all in our power to conserve it. I feel the same way about the Japanese and the Hungarians, right? Even though I would never pretend to be their culture or their people, I would never understand it. I just like visiting, and I hope that Japan is as maximally Japanese as possible, Hungary is as maximally Hungarian, and I want my country to be as maximally for British natives as possible. And if there are right-wing Jews who agree with that, then thank you. I appreciate it. I did indeed see Vivek's Christmas crash. You know what? Should I do a video on that article? Because it's really quite tempting. What is an American? Not you, Vivek. Sorry. Because if you try to redefine America as a purely propositional nation, then how do you square the circle of not revoking American citizenship from the people who don't agree with the proposition? And what are you describing if someone's ancestors stepped off the Mayflower, but they've been ideologically poisoned against the propositions of America? You're basically describing someone who has been deluded into self-hatred. But in order to hate yourself, you have to be that thing. So no, Vivek, you, a Hindu anchor baby, who is currently trying to ethno-nepotistically crowbar more of your countrymen into America via H-1Bs and denigrate the identity of heritage Americans by reducing it to a set of rote-learned platitudes and insinuating that Martin Luther King is himself a founding father. No. The founding fathers themselves wouldn't have liked you. I'm sorry, that's a historical fact. I'm not saying they're right to be so prejudiced, but they would not have liked you. I have not watched Nick Griffin on Five Pillars podcast. This is not something I ever expected. I saw on Substack the other day that Nick Griffin, the former leader of the BNP, had commented on one of my posts. I don't remember what the comment said. Yeah, I think it's retarded to think that we can make peace with Islam. Nope. Sorry. There's no situation where they will be my co-belligerents. They hate me, they won't produce our civilization. Not gonna happen.
Do you think it was foolish of us to insist to return to Israel after the league was so consumed by Islam?
I'm not sure what that super chat means. Insist we return to Israel? I don't know who we is in that sentence. Because foolish of us to insist to return to Israel after the Middle East was so consumed. I genuinely don't understand that super chat. Please clarify in the comments. Thank you for the super chat, sir. Appreciate it. Well, I appreciate the words of affirmation. Thank you very much. You should have asked a question to get your money's worth, but you could have at least insulted me. Is no one going to send in an insult? At least make me laugh. Led Zeppelin track? I don't know. With Nail, no. Unfortunately, I do not. I am wholly uncultured, I'm afraid. Thank you for the $10 super chat. Oh, it's Australian dollars, right? That's 3 bottle caps. Many people are saying. Thank you very much, sir. Loads of good people in Australia, by the way. Why, thank you. I appreciate it. My wife thinks that these sort of ties and pocket squares soften me and make me less insufferable, so I'm inclined to agree with her. But I like this colour combo. What can I say? Thank you for the super chat, sir. I saw a very mean-spirited comment in a Pimlico Journal article that they keep writing about us, me and my friends, saying that I get my suits from Top Man. I'll have you know this was Slater's, and I also buy from Next. Possibly. I mean, France has been projected to be the first one to succumb to ethnic and sectarian violence before Britain has, and it might prove a wake-up call for us, but yeah, I don't know how you contain that, I'm afraid. I think it's the post-war consensus and the delusion that everyone is a blank slate, and also the belief, because people are sitting there looking at spreadsheets the entire time, that everyone is a fungible, interchangeable integer, and so and this is why the UN released its document on replacement migration. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's just like banal economic modelling. Just saying, well, you know, the birth rates are falling off in this place, so we need to just subsidise Europe's falling birth rates with just raw human mass, just bodies from the Indian subcontinent. And they just don't think there's going to be any problems, because deep down they think everyone is exactly the same. They just think that there are just material differences that stop us from being identical. And they are motivated to engage in that reasoning because of the atrocities of the Second World War. If we stopped defining ourselves by the atrocities that one country in a brief period of time committed for a very specific ideology, then we would cut loose the delusions of liberalism, and we would just go back to being a normal country, acting in the interests of the people that actually live here and whose ancestors built it, and we're going to have children to sustain it again. I think that would just be a much more healthy thing to do. You don't even need to engage in sort of like grand scale. I think there's a lot of people. I'm working on this theory for a time, but I'm not sure what to call it. It's like the Hunger Gamesification of politics. There's a lot of people who want to find the one document or the one figure or the one group that's behind everything, right? And it's because we believe, of course, in right-wing politics, that sovereignty rests ultimately in an individual. The sovereign is he who decides the exception. It's why we think monarchy is the best form of government. But I think what's been built by liberal ideology is this disaggregated system where the buck ultimately stops with no one, and it's only a kind of monarchy or dictatorship when it suits. They can sort of press power on and off. Otherwise, it just runs on ideology. And a lot of people think that when they track that ultimate culprit down, they'll have a kind of... Everyone's seen The Running Man by... not the new one, shit. The Arnold Schwarzenegger one, right? Where he puts Killian in the rocket chair, he shoots it down, he shows live on air the fact that the Bakersfield butchery incident was doctored, he kisses the Hispanic girl, they overthrow the government, and everyone claps. I think people think that politics works like that. If you just show the people the truth on a broadcast, then they will renounce the power structure, and the power structure will be surrounded on all sides by a group of spirited civilians, and they'll have no choice but to surrender. And it's like, I don't think we're going to get our Running Man moment, guys. I think we can win, and I think we can do substantive things to hold the traitors to account. I think we can engage in remigration. There was a good post that I put on X. I put many good posts out, but actually reading a Runnymede Trust report, which again I might do a video on, that just lays out all of the legal changes that's made it possible for the Home Secretary to unilaterally strip people of citizenship and deport them. And they were saying this is horrible, and I just saw it as a blueprint for doing what we want. But lots of people think that that will ultimately end up with us, you know, shooting a bow and arrow at President Snow and going, doo-doo-doo-doo. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. We can win, but it's not going to be like a movie. And it's not going to be just one bad guy, and some awful people are going to get away with it. But we may as well try and hold the ones that we can to account. Like Boris Johnson.
I'm playing Civilization 5, and a certain religion has been spread to my cities. Do I just burn my PC now, or what?
Whatever I say might get me arrested in my country. I will say that I haven't played Civ 5. Lots of people didn't play Civ 7.
I try to warn you about Finkel's time. I'm 60. The man is fine. Always has been. You are doing a great job. It's somewhat verbose.
I'm always verbose. I always just ramble, I'm afraid. You're just going to have to put up with it. I can't change. I can't be more concise. If I didn't follow my instincts and just say what I thought, I would have gotten nowhere. As far as warning me about Danny Finkelstein, I appreciate people trying to warn me that he was in bad faith. It doesn't actually matter to me whether or not he's in bad faith. It just matters to me whether or not my conscience is clear. And I'm happy to publicly litigate this disagreement to show to people that he is either a hypocrite or just he's not hypocritical because he's just he's blatantly dedicated to preserving the interests of his own ethnic group. And that's fine, but then he can't be a universalist when it suits. He can't appeal to a universalist morality to say, aren't you cruel to Jewish people or indifferent to their suffering? Because I'm not, but Nick Fuentes is. And then be totally indifferent to the suffering of white Americans or English people when they're enduring the same atrocities. So all I did was just show that I ran up against the wall of his ideology. I kept pressing the button that he didn't want me to press because he wouldn't answer my question, and then he crashed out and insulted me. And so now people don't have to take him seriously. Right? This is what I do. This is why this year I've got that, you know, that Grim Reaper meme of just knocking on the door? It's like Fraser Nelson, Robert Toombs, Michael Gove, The Spectator and Unheard. Now Danny Finkelstein. Chat, who do you think that I'm going to get in a high profile battle with next year and they're going to crash out? Make your bets. The reason I don't isn't because I'm not that cheap, because I am. It's because it's plastic, and I'm against wearing plastic clothing. It's itchy and it makes you infertile. Oh, I thought I could smell it. Yes, we can't have borders anymore because an Indian on a moped must deliver me a pizza. Thank you for the super chats. Wow, this is so generous. Genuinely, I have the best audience. Thank you so much. It's a very esoteric insult. Appreciated. Thank you, sir.
Congrats to your 100K. What is your opinion about the role of web cartel in the decline of our Western civilization in the last decades?
I think it's a pompous think tank and a cocktail party for the International Anywhere class where they can go and feel important. And when they're all doing drugs and having sex with each other and drinking heavily, like they do in Westminster, then it makes them more pliable to adopt the ideas that when they... Because these politicians are totally incompetent and careerists, they don't know what to do, and so they will just read whatever's on the piece of paper that's been handed to them, which is why they were chasing central bank digital currencies and digital IDs during COVID. That's why the World Economic Forum overplayed their hand and were pressing so hard on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's why they were insisting that it was conspiracy theory to just speak about the things that they were writing and saying in front of cameras. And it's why the UK government under Rishi Sunak appointed the World Economic Forum its sort of czar over AI policy, and then, you know, quietly scrapped that plan. So I think they presented themselves as credible, and so for decades the government was willing to farm its policies out to them. And then it turns out that Klaus Schwab got like cooed for sexual impropriety allegations, right? And also they just lost the PR war. You know, I think, weirdly enough, I think that my talk radio segment was pretty important about that, because talk radio wouldn't talk about the World Economic Forum despite the number of people that were calling in until I had a very sober discussion about it, just basically being like the European Union or the United Nations with Peter Caldwell, and it did really well. And it was just, again, I think I have this ability to just phrase things quite calmly and straightforwardly, because I'm not thinking about how I might be perceived, or I'm not thinking about what opportunities might be closed off to me if I say the true thing. So I think that I end up having a weirdly reassuring effect for people, because they just listen to me and they go, oh, this guy's come with receipts and he's able to cite statistics and quotes, and he's just saying it frankly as if it's normal, so it must be correct. And so, yeah. Anyway, the WEF again, they aren't the bogeyman. They're a nexus, but they're not the only nexus for elites to go and meet and share bad ideas with. It's why Alex Jones has got this sort of like schizo chart in his head of just naming all the various organizations. And they're all the same people that go to them, right? Yes, and we have to force the issue. I mean, that's the issue that I'm going to be forcing in the next year. That and just confronting the fact it's not like radical Islam or Islamism or political Islam. It's just Islam. Just get to grips with it. Just speak plainly. Be honest. Don't put yourself in pretzels. I haven't. I admit I haven't seen Master and Commander. I know people keep posting screenshots from it and saying it's an amazing movie. I just haven't seen it yet. Thanks for the super chat. Remind me. Scottish history, supporters of the Stuart dynasty. Oh, Glorious Revolution. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Great shame that we didn't succeed on that particular one. Right, let me open up the questions from social media again. Oh. If we move to... I don't know where this comparison's come from, because Harry Cole brought it up, and I've unless it's just the fact that I'm cancelled from everywhere and keep forcing issues, I'm nowhere near as large as a... Oh, I'll answer that in a second. Yeah, I know I'm nowhere near as big as Fuentes' audience. He's a much more talented broadcaster. He's funnier, but he's also far more offensive than I am, and he talks predominantly about Israel and American politics, and I do a little bit of American politics here and there because I love America, but I'm focused almost entirely these days on immigration and sort of Catholic social issues like abortion, bits of euthanasia, and also comic books. So I just have a different format, and I would never pretend otherwise. So yeah. So as far as the says Zuma historian beef, so I actually have never interacted with this guy. I saw him like quote retweet me a couple of times in a rather disparaging fashion, and I think he misread some of my posts. For example, I think he was involved in the Homeland Party, and then when I said I didn't want to join the Homeland Party, and I think accurately predicted that they were going to be susceptible to infiltration, and that not very wise people were leading it in the form of Kenny Smith. Then they ended up clipping that from my show. And again, I just respond to questions when I'm asked them very honestly, and so I just responded honestly because lots of viewers were asking people at the Lotus Eaters at the time to join the Homeland Party because they wanted to make it a thing, and they were being very honest about it, and I understand wanting to make a new party. I just didn't think that a guy that used to lead the BNP and then was in Patriotic Alternative was probably the best optics. And Zuma Historian, I've never seen any of his content. It's just that he had quote retweeted me a few times nipping at my heels, and so I just thought, I'll just mute him. And so I found the other day, because a friend of mine sent me over on WhatsApp that he had quote retweeted him on something else, and I was like, oh, okay, it seems like he quotes retweets me a lot. Look, I do loads of my stuff behind the scenes. I talk to people very one-on-one. I have a very non-performative view of this sort of thing. So I speak to all sorts of people all the time that are in this space, and I don't tell people about it. And if he's got an issue with me, I mean, he's never once reached out to me privately, and so I think I can only conclude from that this is about racking up relative attention on social media or trying to outdo one another on likes or something, but I haven't engaged in any of it. I don't think I've ever actually interacted with him publicly or privately. So I don't know what the beef is. I know that he got his YouTube channel taken down. I don't know what for, but if he wasn't inciting violence, that's terrible. You shouldn't be deplatformed. Again, I've got no beef with this person, so there you go. That's that question answered, I think, probably unsatisfactorily, but honest answer. Anyway, resuming Twitter questions until we get any more super chats, and I'll wrap up soon enough because I've got spuds in the oven and I've got to do dinner. Someone asked, custard or fresh cream with apple crumble? Why would you ruin it? Custard is horrible. It has a horrible taste and a horrible texture. Cream is really nice, but why would you put it on apple crumble? Apple crumble tastes sweet enough as it is. Cream with like mince pies, sure. Cherry pie, lovely. Anything else? Nah. Someone else, this is on Twitter, Deep Bravo, as a question, given the Catholic Church's stance internationally and the Pope's recent statements, do you think there will be changes to a more nationalist or counter-Islam sentiment? I think it's only inevitable given the growth of the Catholic Church in Africa, but also among young men. Oh, thank you for the super chat. So no, I don't really read any manga outside of Berserk and Junji Ito. I like Junji Ito. Berserk, the content of it was a little bit too gratuitous in the Eclipse arc, and especially Lost Children, is it? I think it's called. For my taste, even though the art was fantastic. As far as going on those podcasts, I don't know the second one. The first one, Archcast, I happen to remember about 3 years ago. Arch, and this is the only time I've ever interfaced with his content, so I could be completely ignorant of everything else, but he had on a panel of people to go through a segment that Harry and I did discussing the fact that there was a forum on a Twitter rival platform that was full of anime drawings of prepubescent children, and we said that if you're looking at drawings of pornography, or if you're looking at this sort of material, it's disgusting and it's degrading to you, even if actual human beings and children are not involved in it. Because you are what you continually do, and there's no such thing as... nobody's getting harmed. Actually, it's degrading you, and in the virtue ethicist or the Christian view, you know neither not the hour nor the day that you will be judged, and so act like you're going to be judged at all times. And you also need to build yourself up with virtue to be sufficiently prepared for when a crisis strikes that your family can lean on you. And so you don't want to indulge in the kind of disgusting vices that you wouldn't want brought up in conversation. And therefore, you are evasive and incapable of properly connecting with people. And this was all my argument. And I wrote a really long, well, actually quite short compared to the piece I write now, piece on Lotus Eaters saying consent is not a moral standard. As in, like, it's not the only moral axiom upon which everything is based. And I remember that the podcast that Arch and his panel did responding to it insinuated at some point that we were actually trying to ban drawings, suggestive drawings of children, because we wanted to look at the real thing. It's like, okay, if you're platforming that and you didn't push back on it, that's disgusting. Like, really bad faith. And so, never received an apology for that. I raised it with Carl at the time, but I don't think Carl said anything. I actually don't know if I am. I'm probably crippling midwit. I basically dyscalculia. I can't learn other languages. Like my wife's very intelligent. She makes really dumb decisions. Like marry me. Blimey, you either die a child or live long enough to become a wife jack. I can't believe I just made that joke. She's very intelligent. She can do computer programming. She speaks Japanese, but she's white. She's English. Me, I can think very hard in one direction. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily intellectually flexible. And so I know I have real hard limits. My only frustration is there are a lot of intelligent people, and I'm just kind of annoyed that they haven't reached these conclusions before me, and I think that I'm saying just basically really banal and obvious things, and I don't know why this is shocking to people. But if there's a use in me keep saying it, then I'll just keep saying it, I suppose. Oh, Charles Veitch has dropped into the chat. Congratulations. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I hadn't heard of you before. I will give your content a watch at some point over Christmas when I've actually got some time off for once. Right, next one. Given the Spectator saga, which, along with the recent decimation of Piers Morgan by Nick Fuentes has shown massive cracks in the politics of the UK right. Do you think the establishment will keep freezing out you and anyone else capable of winning to protect themselves? Absolutely. They will double down on the cancellation. They've already promised it. At that Unheard event that I streamed about a couple of weeks ago, Claire Fox was saying there's groypers everywhere. And by groypers, she meant like me and Charlie Downs. So we need to ban them from everything. On what? I think Steve and I don't share the same theory of justice in that he's not a Christian. And so he is content to judge people as groups or categories. I'm not trying to be uncharitable here, by the way. This is just the impression that I've got from Steve's posts, because I do follow him. And his interview with Liam Tufts. Oh, thank you, Charles. Well, I don't drink. However, we are, me and my Zoomer friends that people have seen before, the likes of Harrison Pitt, Charlie Downs, Mr. Charlie Sampson, Lewis Brackpool, some others are going out for a Christmas lunch on Sunday. It's the last time we'll see all of each other before we split off and go and see our respective families. So, yeah, I'll put that behind the bar. Thank you. As far as Steve, so I don't wish to be uncharitable. I just want to make that clear, because I think ultimately the kind of country that we both want to live in is basically a similar vision on the horizon, even if the contours of it are a bit murky. But I think I disagree with Steve in that he is content to just send everyone back because he thinks that's a necessary measure. I actually think that we can judge people on an individual basis, and that we can conduct remigration, which is a policy that we both endorse, by criminalizing behaviors that we find distasteful according to our cultures and customs. Because if we believe that culture is downstream from ethnicity and family formation, then people will do these things out of habit, or they'll want to do them, and so they will go back to a land which allows them to do them. So either we'll get an increased number of self-deportations, or we will just have people fall into the category of criminal and therefore either offer them to leave their own devices or deport them. And so this means that we can actually accurately weed out people who are sincerely our friends and evict our enemies. And those friends, by the way, by the time that rigorous policy has been done, will number like, what, 100, maybe 1,000? We'll return to something like the demographic composition of Britain before 1948. And it will be done in a way that is just. And I say just also to say that before things get so drastic that people will be willing to accept collective punishment even though it is bad. Because blanket remigration, including sending people back, well, not even sending people back, sending people to nations that one of their parents come from when their other parent is English, which is also a policy I don't support. Like, why would you want to send David Curtin to the Caribbean? That seems to be very unfair. Most people have a sense of fairness that means that we will treat and meet people as they are. And so you do actually need to judge on a case-by-case basis. It just so happens that broadly groups behave in a certain way because the individuals that make up those groups behave in a predictable way, and so they'll pretty much fall unanimously into the category of enemy. And enemy just means, whether out of habit or spite, they won't continue our civilization and they'll recreate the conditions of a failed third world shithole in ours. So I just think we disagree on the moral foundations of the policy. And this is why I don't use the term ethno-nationalism as well, because I don't want to create an ideology out of how my country used to be in order to return my country to that. And also, it doesn't really make sense linguistically to separate ethnos and nation, because nation just means people. I know I'm being pedantic there, but I'm not going to be encouraged to adopt a label that I just don't identify with. This is the autist in me, I suppose. I'm waiting for the edits. Someone needs to do me a Christmas hype edit. Someone needs to do me a hype edit. I'm very vain. I haven't had one. But just with me with a little elf hat. That I've had people draw me before, and that's very flattering. That's wonderful. Oh my life, I've got so many notifications. I'll have to look at this in a moment. Someone has sent the following question. Opinion on the Christian nationalism view championed by Bob of Speaker's Corner. Oh, there's one been super chatted in, so I'll address this first. Mince pie. I don't like the texture of Christmas pudding. Ooh, okay, also American cheese and cheese. Like, it doesn't really taste of anything. Well, I can't announce anything. Keep your eyes peeled for Restore Britain work in January, February. That's all I'll say. Look, all my friends work for Restore Britain, right? So, you know, natural home, I suppose. Anyway, so the question I was asked was my opinion on the Christian nationalism put forward by Bob of Speaker's Corner. And, uh-oh, here we go. Thoughts on James O'Brien. I'm not going to get... Okay. So, it won't have escaped a lot of your attention that whenever there's a Q&A, I tend to ask a question, and it tends to get caught on camera, and I tend to cause some controversy, right? So, the Groiper tactic before it was all anonymous and online, before basically, you know, Q&As got screened because the Groipers were so effective, worked really well at Turning Point events because they forced Charlie Kirk to confront the contradictions in his own worldview that were fed to him by like Republican donors, and it made him more based. And Charlie was a good man, by the way. So I'm not saying in any way that he was a hypocrite or an insufficient soldier. He's a good man. But you can direct that criticism in Q&As in front of cameras if you attend these events. And so I've kind of reached the point now where either I'm banned from the events or they won't ask me because they recognize me, especially in politics. So what I need you guys to do is start doing that. Like, you should go and join the Policy Exchange mailing list. Go and join the mailing list for things like Onward. Go to Unheard events. That's a big one because they're all recorded and they're going to be the least prepared for those questions, right? Even if you work and live in London, make sure that you get the tickets and you go, because they will be filmed and the clips will be circulated. And look, I understand some people can't put their face to it, but some young men, especially if you're students, right, can go and do this. Make sure you're credible, make sure you're well-dressed, make sure you know what you're asking. It's very precise. You know, be a good brand ambassador for our movement. But you need to go and do it because I can't do it a lot now. They see me coming from a mile off. They know that like a hand grenade rhetorically is going to be thrown at them. So if I were to ring up James O'Brien and say who I am, I wouldn't be allowed on. Just like I wouldn't be allowed in the question time audience, but I also wouldn't be allowed on the panel, you know? I'm but a lonely exile ratioing people in Twitter comments. Anyway, so this Bob of Speaker's Corner's question. Yeah, no, because the Bible doesn't actually command you to deny your own people exist and your own ethnic group exists. And this is why at Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit comes down on the apostles, but also all of the surrounding people, it speaks to them in their particular ethnic tongues. It doesn't create a universal language. This is why God, in Genesis, demolished the Tower of Babel, because man was hubristic enough to build one universal structure reaching up to heaven to try to dethrone God. We are not... You shouldn't have the blank slate with Christian window dressing. And also, this is why there are different characters, different ethnic expressions of Christianity. It's why African Pentecostal charismatic megachurches are very different to English Catholicism or Anglicanism. So we should recognize ethnic differences. And when the injunction at the conclusion of the Gospel of Matthew is to go forth and be a disciple to all nations, it did not mean liquidate national differences. It means recognize that peoples are different and minister to them in the ways which will persuade them to come to Christ. So Christianity is not a great liquefier. It is not just liberalism before liberalism so we can all live in John Lennon's Imagine. And so I profoundly disagree with this. And it also doesn't mean that recognizing ethnic differences is in any way a moral judgment of other ethnicities. You can only judge people based on cultures and beliefs. But it does mean that other cultures, especially non-Christian ones, have hostilities towards groups rather than judging them on individual bases. And we should recognize that and not associate with those people accordingly, because otherwise it's just fighting with one hand behind our back. I think all of that's reasonable. It's all corresponding with Christian scripture. And I'm happy to talk about Christians who disagree with me on this point. I'm also writing something, a sort of long thing on civic nationalism, ethnic nationalism, and the secret third thing, which covers Christianity and ethnicity. It'll probably be published in January. Someone said, how do we actually pull off mass deportations? Well, okay. We've already got some of the legislation. Repeal the Human Rights Act, leave the European Convention on Human Rights, amend or leave the UN 1952 Refugee Convention, repeal any legislation that contained UN Refugee Convention language in our law, remove the Supreme Court, remove the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act, which makes it so that the civil service can't be hired and fired, replace the entire civil service with true believers. Obviously, you have to win government as well. Put all of this in your manifesto, by the way, so the House of Lords can't block it. And if the King doesn't give it royal assent, then that creates a constitutional crisis. And at the moment, I don't think the Windsors have all that much legitimacy to source from the public, especially on the number one issue that matters to them. And then go through all the pieces of legislation that allow the Home Secretary to unilaterally strip people of citizenship if it isn't in the public good. So you need to repeal the 1948 British Nationality Act and the 1981 British Nationality Act, do a clarification act to reset citizenship back to the standard of 1914, but remove birthright citizenship and language from the law that speaks about our imperial provinces, because we don't have those anymore. And then just start denaturalizing and deporting people who have either committed crimes and renounced their citizenship, or hold cultural practices and prejudices that we just don't want here. And then that will leave us with a much more sustainable population. And in terms of logistics, I mean, you can probably commandeer a series of planes, sort of discontinued commercial airliners, for the military themselves to run. And you would also, of course, need to ensure that said military are on side. And I think that the Trump administration's having a record month of military recruiting as soon as they came in, when they got rid of DEI and at least promised to clear out the deep state of malign actors, something they haven't done, unfortunately. But I think that you'll see a recruitment drive from patriotic young Englishmen who want to do something about their country and have just been kept out of being able to do it. Like, basically, everything ran really well when we just had, like, normal white guys in charge of things. So let's just do that again. And I think we can just do anything, actually. This is why I think the moon landings conspiracy is an anti-white psyop. I think that we went to the moon, again, when white guys with, like, calculators in their breast pockets were just doing everything on the back of a notebook. Anyway. Someone says, any advice on presenting well and overcoming nerves when public speaking or presenting? I'm afraid that we don't have any advice on that, because I don't think before I speak. I've never had any camera consciousness. I was actually a theatre kid, which shouldn't shock anyone. So I've always done a lot of performances. And performances, by the time I learned my lines, were just muscle memory for me. And so I just went through the motions, and then people enjoyed the performance. But I felt completely disconnected from the performance when I'm doing it. Like, I don't even realise that I'm speaking in front of a camera when I'm doing live streams. The reason I actually have cuts in my pre-recorded videos is because I don't feel the same when I'm pre-recording a video as when I do when I'm live streaming. And I think this is actually probably why, even though the algorithm favors pre-recorded videos, and so I basically have to do them so that, you know, my channel is financially sustainable. If I was just live streaming every night and basically just did a live show, I'd love it. And it's actually a possibility going forward. So if you want more frequent live stream shows, I'll consider it. I'll wrap up in a moment because viewership is dying off, and I've done nearly 2 hours, and I think my potatoes are done. I didn't even realize that we spent all this time together, ladies and gentlemen. Final one that I'm going to read from text, and then we'll clear up any lingering super chats. Question: what are some unexpected things you've had happen, or unexpected side effects to your life while working at Lotus Eaters? Meeting my wife was one of them. Doing the dating app video with Dan for Brokenomics, which you can go back and watch. Absolute classic. But after we filmed that, after I wrote my article saying dating apps are demonic, I met my wife on Hinge, and she was 10 minutes walk down the road from me this whole time. Wonderful blessing. And so I wouldn't have the life I have without the help of Carl and my co-hosts, all of whom I still greatly respect and appreciate, and that you should be watching and financially supporting if you have the means to do so, because they're like the only independent media bastion now, other than New Culture Forum, but the future of that is indeterminate. It's literally the only institutions that aren't captured, right, are me, Dan Wooden, Lotus Eaters, New Culture Forum, and Restore Britain. Those are the only ones I can vouch for. There might be others out there that are smaller, that I'm just not familiar with, that don't have any undue influences working within them to tell them what to say or what to do. But those I can definitely guarantee are good people, and they're not compromised. So, what else has happened? Okay, well, here's a sad thing. So, I haven't really lost many friends or had family members disassociate with me from anything I've done until last week. And I don't know if my friends will see this, but it's a shame. We invited them to our wedding. We were friends with a member of the couple for a great number of years, and I think I owe her a lot. And I don't think I would have been in the state to have met my wife without the advice and support that she provided me in 2023. And unfortunately, we got a phone call earlier this week, right before I went on air on Monday, I think it was. So I did, if I seemed a bit pissed off on Monday stream, it's because I was in a bit of a bad mood. But they rang and said, because of my, specifically me, public profile and people's ability to Google me or maybe recognize me, they didn't want anyone from their family who was on the left spectrum of politics. They didn't want any shitlibs in their friends and family circles having an argument at their wedding. I don't know why you would, because it's their day. We didn't have anyone argue at our wedding when we had the likes of Liz Truss and Mary Harrington and all of the online Zoomerwaffen and the Lotus Eaters hosts at our wedding, despite some of my family members, not necessarily always agreeing with my politics. But they just said, because the risk is too great, you can't come. And of course, I said to them, you never drive a car the same way once it's been scuffed. And so we're not friends anymore, and that's a great shame. But if I have to make peace with the fact that I think I've done the right thing, and if people would rather have people in their lives that would make a scene at their wedding over politics than people who say provocative things that they agree with, but ultimately understand it's their day and we're there to celebrate them rather than me make a scene or make it about myself, then I can't make that poor decision. I can't unmake that poor decision for them. Anyway, no, my wife did not go to the same school as me, actually. So nice try. Stop guessing details about my life, ladies and gentlemen. Leave me alone. I'm basically a hermit for a reason, all right? Anyway, thank you all so much for your generosity. I appreciate it a lot, and I may be streaming again on Saturday. I'm not sure whether or not we'll have Across the Pond episodes this week, because Tate hasn't said whether or not he can get studio space while they're out in Las Vegas. So, honestly, my show with Tim's channel is so scuffed. But it seems people are enjoying it, so we're going to keep it going, even if whatever happens to Timcast IRL, we're hopefully going to keep Across the Pond going. I'll leave a stream on Saturday night or on Monday night, and then take a few days off for Christmas because I need it, because I'm quite tired. It's been a hell of a year, as I'm sure you can all empathise with. But I'm going to do one basically on the Longhouse and the feminist-occupied government and how our intelligence agencies are captured by DEI and all of this recent moral browbeating over teaching boys to respect women. As I said, if the lessons aren't in Urdu, it doesn't mean anything. Anyway, thank you all so much for your support. Thank you for tuning in to a stream which is just me ranting about incoherent topics. I was hoping this was going to be something like a Dave Green's recent podcast. If you aren't watching those, by the way, Dave and I, we're not close. He doesn't really know me. He's just been cordial to me in our few interactions. But Dave's content is some of the most nourishing stuff you'll get out there. So please do go over, listen to his stuff. It's well worth your while. You're welcome to tell him I sent you, whether or not. But I think we should all be supporting each other even if we gain nothing from it, because we should uplift the quality out of the slop, But I wanted it to be something like that, where I talk about the things that you care about, I answer your questions openly. I put myself at great risk of ridicule, and hopefully it was engaging, even though it was incoherent. Thank you all very much for watching. If you don't watch my next stream before Christmas, have a merry and blessed Christmas. Prayers go to your family. I appreciate prayers going to mine. Stay safe, take care, and goodbye.